Freedom is rarely given, it is earned, and often obscured in the mists of history. And when it is hidden, it must be brought back into the light. I am Stephen Finley Archer, and this is the Freedom and Democracy Road. If these stories matter, I'll show you how to begin them at the end. Welcome back to the Freedom and Democracy Road. Today I want to reflect on what my family taught me about freedom. I grew up among people who did not speak about ideals, but they carried them quietly in their hopes for the future and for their children. There was no talk about entitlement. They spoke about duty and gratitude. Freedom in my childhood home was not discussed as a theory. It was something already paid for and not to be wasted. When I was young, I don't remember hearing long discussions about democracy. I remember hearing about responsibility, cooperation, commitment, and community. The adults around me had lived through the worst economic depression and global war imaginable. They didn't speak about those years often. It was too painful. But they were there in the way they carried themselves. In my family, that experience was always present. My father defended aerodromes in southern Britain during the Second World War. My Uncle Ern was one of the fortunate navigators who survived the Danbuster raid over Germany. And my Uncle Steve towed gliders over enemy lines after Normandy. He was shot down and escaped through the underground. They never described it as saving civilization. They described it as doing their job. On my mother's side, Ireland was never far away. My grandfather had left Northern Ireland in 1909, but he carried his roads and trees in his paintings, which we still admire. The winding road I use in my banner is one of his. Growing up, I absorbed something without realizing it, a love of history. That has always felt personal to me. I didn't grow up thinking about constitutions. Canada didn't even have one yet. I grew up watching people keep their word and tell the truth. Not loudly, not perfectly, but consistently. Over time, I began to see what they were protecting and passing on. Wasn't only territory and institutions, it was a way of living together. And that way of living together requires something that rarely makes headlines: steadiness. Years later, when I began reading deeply about Ireland's struggle for independence, something felt familiar. The names were different, the tragic circumstances were different, but the human questions were the same. How long do you endure something that feels wrong? When do you decide change is necessary? And once change begins, how do you live with neighbors who see it differently? I realized I wasn't only drawn into the dramatic moments of revolution. I was drawn to the people who had to wake up the next morning and keep living together. When I began writing what would become the Irish Clans, I wasn't focused on retelling famous events. I was trying to understand what those years must have felt like to ordinary families. The uncertainty, the divided loyalties, the effort to remain steady when everything seemed to be shifting, when lives were in peril. In many ways, I think I was trying to write about the same steadiness I had seen in my own family. Steadiness forged in battles fought before anyone knew the outcome, before I was alive. If this way of looking at things resonates with you, you're welcome to like this video, subscribe, and follow the road. Before we finish, I want to notice two small moments from our own time. Not victories, not crises, different in form but shaped by the same quiet sense of responsibility, beginning in families and carried outward. This past year, my wife and I have been blessed with a new granddaughter and a new great-granddaughter, new lives full of wonder. With their parents, we feel responsible to help guide them onto the road towards lives that we cannot yet imagine, just as our parents did for us. Last week in our community, the Volunteer Center held a locally staged melodrama, an old-time Gold Rush themed event. Simple, wholesome fun for families of all ages. Their mission is simple: to bring people together to respect, value, and support one another. They say, when community comes together, magic happens. Freedom is often preserved that way, not through dramatic speeches, but through ordinary community commitments carried forward. The road is still being walked. As you move through this week, you may have the opportunity to help guide young loved ones on the road of freedom and democracy, to close the cycle of life in your own family. If you do, it will be your blessing. Take note of it. That too is part of the road. Thank you for walking a little of the road with me today. If you'd like to continue along the road, you're welcome to subscribe and to like this video if it speaks to you. If you'd like to begin my story, you'll find a complimentary personally signed copy of Searchers in the description below. In our next episode, we'll look at the roots of American and Irish revolutions. Until next time, stay on the road to freedom and democracy, because this path only continues if we walk it together. Thank you.